Hello, good afternoon. Today, our guest is Professor Jaime Gobaya, and we're going to be talking about the Congo Empire. Hello, Jaime. How are you doing?
Hello, Lipton. Everything's fine here in Portugal on this side of the Atlantic. Nice to meet you, and thanks very much for inviting me to tell something about my work.
I'm happy that you're on the show. I enjoy conversations with smart people like yourself. Your article is entitled The Confederation Between the Kingdoms of Portugal and the Congo, 1511 to 1665. Jaime, why is Congo important in history?
Yeah, Congo is important because there's some relations established with the Portugal in a very important era in the 16th century, 17th century, and this is very important to explain how European history was constructed. Um, Sometimes we look at the European history looking only for the European countries, and of course the relationships established with other important kingdoms outside Europe. These relationships was very important to also the construct of the European world.
All right. Congo was a prominent empire during the pre-colonial era. Was it a centralized empire? Did it have slavery? What was special about Congo?
Yeah, that's to answer your question. I think it's important to say something about precisely why the Portuguese go to Africa, because it was precisely because of that thing, and of course. This my interest to study Congo and Angola was it somehow a result of several years of research in a project supported by European funds to study precisely the secular clergy in the Portuguese Seaborne Empire. On that time, we had a team of around 20 researchers, each one with a subject to investigate, and I dedicated myself to study sub-Saharan Africa. And so my idea was precisely to answer the questions, what were the reasons for Portugal intensification of relations with this part of African continent, and what was the role of the clergy in this diplomatic policy. Because in fact, the Portuguese went to Africa in 1415. They conquered Ceuta, and then there was a continuation of a military policy of conquering positions throughout Moroccan territory, with many victories, but also with disasters, such as the defeat of Alcácer Quibir, well known, where the king and the most of the Portuguese nobility died. I mean, and this the drain on resources caused by the conquest of the North African coast meant that the Portuguese had to look at other African territories in a different light, especially because a different kind of a strategy was needed, relegating conquest by force to the last option. And this is precisely what happened from the end of the 15th century onwards. Just as in the north, in sub-Saharan Africa, there was a group of kingdoms that were strong, powerful, and of course it was not possible to measure forces with them because they were based in land, and the Portuguese power was at the sea and not on land. And so there was a reversal, I would say, a reversal of policy. I mean, prioritizing the establishment of friendly and diplomatic relations in order to get African sovereigns to convert to Catholicism. with the aim of establishing trade relations with them. This goes directly to your question. This was the importance of that territory, establishing trade relations with that kingdoms was very important to the Portuguese. The Portuguese were looking to get, of course, a domination in Africa, which could be territorial, maritime, commercial, spiritual, or both. And it was precisely these different forms of domination, combining the use of force with other forms of contact and collaboration with non-Portuguese populations that gave the Portuguese Empire it somehow its original shape. And I say original because, especially with regard to the relations established with Congo, creating a negotiating platform that allowed Portugal to obtain exclusivity in the trade and exploitation of African products such as ivory, and of course the access to the slave markets. And I think this is a key point in the Portuguese Empire, and curiously not so much studied, especially with regard to the relationship between empire and religion, because it was precisely religion, and specifically the conversion of the Congolese kings to Catholicism, that allowed the Portuguese access to the African hinterlands.
Jaime, you touched on an important point. You said that it was difficult for Portugal to subdue those empires. So, are you saying that pre colonial African empires were powerful? There is a new line of thought in the literature asserting that African empires were not properly portrayed by early historians who contended that Europeans were able to subdue Africa because of military technology. We tend to underestimate the power of pre colonial Africa.
Yeah, without doubts. I mean, it's important to look in that direction. Historiography is sometimes looking only to these kind of relations as an impositive kind of relations, and my focus here is about the friendly relationships and diplomacy. And of course, Congo, looking to Congo, it was a very organized kingdom with currency, with a king, and of course, the Portuguese know that it was very important to establish that kind of relationships. And to look in this kind of history means also, in my opinion, to consider, of course, as you said, the African agency. I think this is very important. The conversion of the kings of Congo from the end of the 15th century, of course, was part of an agreement that was reinforced in first decades of the 16th century. This is important. And I think this is important also to see the African agency in this process of negotiation and establishing contacts. I mean, the conversion of the Congolese leaders to Catholicism was very important in this process. And we do not miss the opportunity to say that it was important to the Congo to get close to powerful European kingdoms that offered them, of course, military support and to give them access to objects and knowledge that no other African leader possessed. So it was very important to the Congolese rulers the recognition of their territory by important European external forces. They also gained the guarantee of strategic cooperation in field of migration and trade, opening up access to the new world order, and of course consolidating its predominance among its neighbors. So historiography sees these relations in the sense of the Portuguese domination, but I believe that the history of these relations is more complex, and that African agency must also be taken into account. We cannot just look at one side. I mean, we have to adopt a polyhedral perspective of historical analysis that allow us to see the various angles, the actions of the two sides, the interests behind these kind of agreements. I mean, the frills of diplomatic rhetoric need to be analyzed throughout a critical lens. And I think in doing so, we will realize that both parties were competitive, interacting, negotiating, and impacting each other.
All right. So you are discussing pre-colonial African diplomacy. So Congo had diplomatic relations with Portugal. That's also another understudied topic.
Yeah, that's true. This is very important because before Confederation, contacts were mainly made by Portuguese who traveled to Congo and were sent to make contact. But as relations reinforced, the sending of embassies became very frequent. The Congo had a permanent embassy in Portugal, later in Madrid, and also in the Roman Curia. On the African side, these embassies were usually made up of Portuguese who had lived in the Congo for a long time, and Congolese who had studied in Portugal and returned to Congo to serve the king. So this became very common. There were even sons of the Congolese kings who became bishops. So the closeness became strong. And in fact, there is no region in Africa better documented than the kingdoms of Congo and Angola, precisely because of those embassies. The exchange of information was very strong. Letters between kings became frequent. Um, Many of these documents are in the National Archive of Torre do Tombo in Lisbon. So, and even are some are even available online. So, the embassies changed and were appointed directly by the kings and made up of people they trust, of course. But the Portuguese were always careful about this because they knew that if Congo came into direct contact with European peoples, their interests could be compromised. And it did. We know that this was one of the reasons that led to the beginning of the end of the Confederation Pact. While it lasted, it was a period, of course, of intense relationship, but like everything else, it ended.
Jaime, we didn't define the Pact of Confederation. What was it?
Yeah, that's true. Well, as I said before, the first contacts and agreements were made at the end of the 15th century. Later, at the beginning of the reign of the Portuguese king Manuel I, and during the reign of the second Christian king of Congo, Afonso, this proximity was reinforced with a confederative pact. That was a pact. The pact was established during the first decade of the 16th century and presupposed a contract of alliance and union with an obligation of close loyalty. And this was nothing new. I mean, common law made it possible for different kingdoms to unite in a confederation, keeping their independence but obliged to follow the same law. And what is interesting is that some 18th century lexicons described this political administrative model as one in which sovereigns confederated themselves not to submit but to become referees. Uh, this would be exactly the expectation that drove the creation and maintenance of this pact of confederation over the centuries, despite some occasional interruptions. It is important to underline, in my view, that this pact was not was just a pact. I mean, uh, that was originated from the desire of the two parties to come together in order to become more powerful. So it was a negotiation process. It was not an imposition process. And this probably explains why it was in force for so long. The pact was only broken in 1665 with the Battle of Anguilla in Angola and the declaration of war between Portugal and the Congo. This was already a different time, of course, when differences between the two kingdoms increased because of the domination of Angola and the interference of other European powers, especially the Netherlands. Of course, relations between the two kingdoms were not absolutely stable during the term of this pact. The Confederation was shaped by several events and became a complex power game of agreements and discord, advances and retreats, while remaining flexible enough for both parties to maintain their respective interests. But the truth is that nowhere else would the Portuguese find or create conditions for the establishment of a confederation between kingdoms of different continents. That's why um, I wanted to study this subject. I would say I saw in this confederation a very interesting model of mixed power, distinct from all those that have so far been studied in historiography, which forces, in my view, to rethink Portuguese imperial dynamics and the modalities of its presence in overseas territories. Um, the Portuguese Empire combined different modes of domination or attempts of domination that sometimes benefit greatly from different strategies, as seems to me have been the case with the one implemented in Congo.
Why was there a conflict between Congo and Angola? You mentioned that the Pact of Confederation broke down after an
Yeah,
incident with Angola.
yeah, because Portugal conquered
Yeah,
Angola,
yes.
and Angola was part of the Congolese kingdom, so that's why the problems raised and a battle was in place.
The Angola was a part of no Angola was a part of the Kingdom of Congo. Angola is also well documented, as you said. But could you just give us a little more information on the relationship between Congo and Angola? Because I know Angola to also be a powerful kingdom.
Yeah, there's a huge territory that belongs to the Congolese kingdom. And when the Portuguese made that contact, the Congolese king was ruling also Angola. Angola was divided in some landlords with a lot of populations and also, of course, with a lot of battles inside that territory. And that's why the Congolese king wants the establish the contact with Portuguese, of course, to obtain some help, to obtain some military support, to increase their territory, and of course to defend the territory. That's why.
Were the conversions legitimate? Were the Congolese converting because of politics, or did they really affirm Christianity?
Yeah. So the conversions meet, I would say, the fundamental requirements to be valid, which was to be done with the consent of the person being converted. I mean, for both the Congolese and the Portuguese, the process was based on negotiation rather than imposition. The problem was that this complex web of relations was dominated by economic interests. There were political and commercial interests behind the conversions, which meant that in practice, many of the converts retained their ancestral religious practices and beliefs. There were some clerics who viewed this situation with some concern and criticized the fact that the conversions only consisted of baptizing people without first indoctrinating them. And in fact, there are sources from the time that show how many the Christian Congolese were unaware of the most basic principles of the Catholic faith. For example, nobles in Congo, of course, also in Angola, often had concubines, married relatives, and worshipped the spirits of their ancestors. I have found interesting documents in Tordutombo archives and also in Roman archives, Vatican archives, of visits by bishops to parishes where they found African Catholics who didn't know how to pray or even make the sign of the cross. So, what kind of Christianity was this? This was the result, of course, of conversions. In the reports that the bishops sent to the Pope, they reported that the increase in the number of Christians was remarkable, but in reality, Congolese Catholicism was fragile. And so Lipton, historians today should not be impressed by certain reports, I would say. So we have to cross-reference these sources and combine different approaches and analytical methodologies. That's why I have been trying to do in my studies on these subjects.
Good. In your article, it is frequently stated that the Congolese exercise agency in the relationship with Portugal. Could you give a specific example or further elaborate on that point?
On agency.
Yes. How did they demonstrate that it was a relationship of equals?
Yeah, because we know it's very clear in the documents that Congolese kings want to be quite similar to the Portuguese kings. In a way, they dress. In a way, they asking some kind of benefits. We know that, of course, the Congolese political elites exploited religion on their own behalf, especially to legitimize their exercise of power. They wore garments made with materials from remote parts of other continents, and their family members were sent to study in Portugal. They managed to get close to Rome, and they have, as I said before, permanent embassies in Roman Curia. They also receive military support, firearms, defensive structures. This is very important. So I think this is a strategy, of course, to reinforce, of course, their power. And we know also that the kings of Congo also obtained the right to use the insignia of the military orders. So I think there was plenty of score for them to act and to defend their interests. We know, for example, some documents from the time showing that the kings of Congo opposed the enslavement of their vassals and also reject and attempt to repress smuggling and other illicit business activities. So, giving this, my argument is that the Congo was not a static piece in a game of Portuguese imperialist chess, as some scholars said. Congo took advantage of the open doors to contact and engage with the wider world while managing to maintain, consolidate, and even expand their own domains. And that's why the agency, for my point of view, is very important to study this kind of relationship.
Jamie, the Pact of Confederation, did it have stipulations, requirements, a criteria? Were
Yes,
there rules governing the pact?
yes. The most important one is to have the same laws. So the Congo was obliged to adapt their own political system to the political system of Portugal, with same rules, with same laws, with same system, political speaking, but also, of course, in the um, judicial system. It was important on that time because it was a very very difficult process to adapt the previous system to a new one. There was some books sent to Congo and people to put in practice that kind of laws.
All right. Another question. Slavery. Did the Congolese engage in slavery?
Sorry, I didn't turn.
Slavery.
Yeah,
Did the Congolese engage in slavery? Did they own slaves?
yeah. There was some people doing that before the Portuguese went there, but the most important strategy uh, for the Portuguese was, of course, to reinforce slavery. Portuguese have had access to slaves in other parts of Africa, but it was, of course, on Congo with these kind of relations that allowed Portugal to reinforce that kind of commerce.
All right. I didn't remember to pose this question. Military aid.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Cold War. Did the Portuguese support the military of the Congo?
Yeah, but it was also the opposite. Congo was helping in some periods was helping Portugal in conquest of some African territories, Angola, for example. So this pact was, of course, to help each other. So it was a union in which, if Portugal needs help, the Congolese king was obliged to devote that kind of help. So we have documents that are showing both situations. Portugal helping Congo, but also Congo helping Portugal.
Think about NATO.
Yeah.
Yes. There is this article on diplomatic relations in pre-colonial Africa and the regional integration in pre-colonial Africa, written by an African academic. I'm interested in
Okay.
the diplomatic history of pre-colonial Africa. Maybe
Yeah.
you could continue with this research to draw parallels between the relationship between Portugal and the Congo by comparing it to NATO, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Yeah. Nice idea. Wonderful
Yeah, yeah,
idea. And
yeah.
this is, I would say, this is, of course, only an article. It is a work in progress. In future, I want to write a book on this because it seems to very important. Because I mean, historiography was not in some periods was not looking in this direction, which seems to me very important to understand, to better understand, of course, the Portuguese Empire, but also the importance of this very powerful territory in Congo.
You have an article titled "The Creation of a Portuguese Diocese in the Kingdoms of Congo and Angola in 1596: Imperial Strategies and Religious Implications." What's that about?
Sorry, sorry.
Oh, you didn't hear me. Your
Yeah,
article, "The Creation of a Portuguese Diocese in the Kingdoms of Congo and Angola in 1596: Imperial Strategies and Religious Implications."
yeah. Yeah, it was also an article in which I study these kind of relations with a focus on the creation of the diocese, because it was a competition between collaboration, of course, but also competition between the Portuguese kings and the Congolese kings to the creation of a diocese in the Congolese territory, because the Congolese, the Portuguese kings had the rights to found this diocese, but the Congolese king wanted also to create the diocese. And it was a fighting process, very nice. And in that article, I analyzed these dynamics that were also imperial dynamics, of course.
Religious competition.
Yeah.
The market for religions, and another interesting parallel between contemporary research and the literature on pre-colonial Africa. I'm really fascinated with pre-colonial Africa, especially its diplomatic history. I
You are
want to know.
you are working on diplomatic history? No.
No, no, I have an article. This is not a journal article. This is an
Okay.
article for a newspaper, blog, magazine.
Yeah.
It's going to be on the Igbos, diplomacy in pre-colonial Igbo land.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that type of literature. I want to know more about industry in Africa. John Thornton, maybe around 1990 or a little before, John Thornton wrote an article on
Yeah.
industry in Africa. Did you? That was years ago. Did you read that article?
No, 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 no.
Yeah, 1990. So you wrote it, and people responded, and the responses were pretty interesting. I would love to see more research on industry in Africa.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah,
I'm
like
gonna I'm
I
gonna
was
look.
speaking to a retired economist, and he said if he were to teach again, he would focus on African history.
Okay,
So
nice.
what's your book going to be about? Tell me something that wasn't discussed in the interview. I guess we will just have a part two then.